As of late, the Night King has his own dragon, and since dragons are huge game changers on the battlefield, the living will have to figure out a way of killing the undead Viserion. Dragons are powerful and extremely difficult to kill. Their scales and hides are incredibly tough and grown. When grown, they resist arrows, swords, and fire. Viserion has been resurrected into a White Walker, which grants him even more protection. The eyes are where a dragon is most vulnerable. The eyes and the brain behind them. In the novels, Tyrion says that dragon cannot be killed through the underbelly, since the scales there are just as tough as those along dragon's back and flanks. Down the gullet is not an option as well. To explain all the possible ways of Viserion's death, which will surely occur at some point of the final season, let's take a look at how dragons have been taken down throughout the history of Westeros. The most of the Targaryen dragons were killed in the Dance of Dragons, which took place roughly 170 years before the events of Game of Thrones. It was a civil war between the Targaryens fighting for the Iron Throne. The most common way the dragons have died is at the claws and the teeth of other dragons. There were 20 dragons alive at the beginning of the Civil War and only 3 survived. Shortly after the Civil War, the dragons went extinct. It was the only major war that had dragons fighting on both sides, and we have it now again with 2 dragons fighting for the living and 1 for the dead. Viserion, the Night King's dragon and the smallest of the 3 dragons, will have to face his larger and stronger siblings in the final season. This is not coming as a huge surprise, however, as ever since the Night King resurrected Viserion, it became quite certain that the final season will contain some epic fights between the dragons. Many fans seem to like a theory in which Drogon kills Viserion, which could have been foreshadowed in the very first season. Viserion is named after Daenerys' brother Viserys, and Drogon on the other hand is named after Dany's late husband Khal Drogo. Back in the first season, Viserys threatened Dany, which resulted with Drogo killing him by dumping molten gold onto his head. It's quite a popular theory that dragon named after Viserys will get his own version of the Golden Crown in the last season by the dragon named after Khal Drogo. Drogon killing Viserion would be poetic, but Viserion is not a white, and therefore fire cannot kill him. According to the showrunners, Viserion is an ice dragon, not just a reanimated corpse, and thus cannot be destroyed by fire. Let me explain. In Season 7, Viserion is killed and then raised back to life by the Night King. This led to an online debate among the fans about what exactly undead Viserion is. Some claimed him to simply be a white dragon like all the other corpses brought back to life, something like the undead white horses. The others, on the other hand, claimed that Viserion has been turned into a dragon version of a White Walker. HBO Viewer's Guide referred to a Viserion as an ice dragon and said that he was shooting blasts of freezing ice breath out of his mouth instead of fire, making the fans even more confused. However, due to the Season 7 finale being submitted for an Emmy nomination, the script was made publicly available in August 2018, clarifying a few points but also raising more questions and contradictions. The script directly refers to Viserion as an ice dragon. The script gives description when the Night King appears at the end that he's done the same thing to Viserion that he did to Craster's sons, only those were babies and this is a dragon. So according to the TV writers, Viserion is now a dragon version of a White Walker. The script also specifies that he's breathing blue-colored fire, not ice blasts, making HBO Viewer's Guide statement false. Even though the script finally confirmed to us that Viserion is a White Walker rather than a White, it also raises several issues. The script says that the Night King's done the same thing to Viserion that he did to Craster's sons. Only those were babies and this is a dragon. This is not correct. The Night King did not do the same thing to Viserion he did to Craster's sons. Viserion was clearly dead and had to be resurrected. In contrast, Craster's son explicitly needed to be delivered alive to be turned into White Walkers. The script refers to Viserion as an ice dragon, but this is not what an ice dragon is. An ice dragon is a legendary creature somewhat resembling a dragon, but made out of living ice. These mythological creatures of legend in the world of Westeros breathe blasts of freezing cold, in contrast to how normal dragons breathe out fire. Their cold breath can instantly freeze people and things solid, a mirror opposite of how breath of regular dragons burn them. Viserion is not made out of living ice, he's a flesh and blood undead creature. He's breathing blue fire instead of cold, which is why Viserion is not an ice dragon. Long story short, Viserion is not a white, he's a White Walker and fire cannot kill him. Danish dragons cannot kill him. Viserion can be killed by 2 things and 2 things only, Dragonglass and Valyrian Steel. Sure, Drogon could rip out Viserion's throat, but what would that do to the undead dragon? Viserion no longer needs to breathe or blood to stay alive. The only thing Danish dragons could do is to dismember him, so that he is unable to fly and move, so that someone could pierce a Valyrian Steel sword or a Dragonglass dagger through his eye. However, that might not be as easy as it sounds. Even though Viserion is the smallest out of the 3, he may have just become the strongest out of the 3 after he was resurrected. His strength and power have been increased. Viserion has been turned into a White Walker, meaning that his siblings' superior size and numbers may not be enough to slow him down. So how to kill Viserion? So-called easiest way would be to kill the man who resurrected him, the Night King. As seen in the previous season when Jon killed a White Walker with Longclaw, killing a White Walker results with the instant collapse of the servants they have raised. In other words, killing the Night King would result with the final death of Viserion, as well as with the collapse of his entire army, since he created all the White Walkers who then created all the Whites. Let's put it this way. You kill the Night King, all the White Walkers die. And if all White Walkers die, all the Whites collapse as well, because they have been created by either White Walkers or their leader. Since killing the Night King would end the Long Night, I don't see him dying before his dragon. The living might eventually defeat the Night King, but it's highly unlikely that this dragon will die this way, or at least not before the very bitter end. Next out of a very few possible ways to kill Viserion would be with Qyburn Scorpion. In the Loot Train battle, the power of Qyburn Scorpion was shown off, inflicting a flash wound on its target. Dragon took a serious hit in the shoulder, forcing him to land. Had it pierced his eye instead of his shoulder, it would have punctured his brain and Drogon would have died. The sister wife of Aegon the Conqueror, Rhaenys Targaryen, lost her dragon in precisely this manner during a conflict with the Dornish. Viserion could be killed with a very lucky shot from Scorpion Bolt that would pierce his eye and drive into his brain, but only if the normal head of the bolt is replaced with Dragonglass or Valyrian Steel. Another way to kill Viserion would be with a magical weapon that has something to do with weirwoods. In the books it's hinted that the living side might be able to use some sort of magical weapon to kill the Night King's dragon. There's a possibility that the living could use one more weapon to kill Viserion. Just as the Night King used his magical weapon to kill a dragon, the living might use their own magical weapon to kill the Night King's dragon. The weapon in question are weirwood arrows. This hint comes from the events that happened during Aegon's conquest. Back then, Torrhen Stark, the king who kneeled after witnessing most of the kingdoms south of the Neck submitting one by one to Aegon, Torrhen decided to amass his army and march south to meet the Targaryen warlord on the battlefield. After seeing Aegon's dragons and his massive host, Torrhen realized that the war was already lost. Instead of fighting, he chose to bend a knee and surrender his crown in order to save his people. While some of the northern lords did agree with this, some on the other hand wanted to fight and die against the Targaryens and their dragons. But it was Torrhen's bastard brother Brandon Snow that had another idea. Brandon offered to cross the Trident along at night, to sneak into the Targaryen camp and assassinate the dragons. Torrhen judged that this was impossible and that the failed attempt would only invite additional retaliation from Targaryens. So he chose to instead send Brandon and 3 maesters across the river to negotiate with Aegon and surrender. How did this bastard brother of the king who kneeled imagine this heroic quest to succeed? Charging into 3 dragons with a sword surely would not do the job. The hint comes from Bran's weirwood visions in the novels. In A Dance with Dragons, Bran Stark has several visions of the past through Winterfell's Heart Tree. One of these visions is of a pale, fierce and dark-eyed young man who slices 3 branches of the weirwood and shapes them into arrows. It has been theorized that this may be Brandon Snow, preparing arrows to kill the 3 dragons of Aegon the Conqueror. Arrows from weirwoods were already used to kill a dragon. Daemon Blackfyre and his sons were also cut down by a shower of arrows fired from weirwood bows at the command of Lord Brandon Rivers, the man who would later become the Three-Eyed Raven. For some reason, we are repeatedly being told that weirwoods are able to slay dragons. Even though one might say that those arrows would not work on the Night King's dragon, I think it's just the opposite. It would work on Viserion just as or even better than Dragonglass or Valyrian Steel, given the origin of the Night King and White Walkers. The White Walkers are made by the children of the forest who draw their powers from the weirwoods. Some theorists believe that a piece of that power could kill the Night King's dragon with one shot. For this to come true, Bran will have to see the same vision he's seen in the books, that of Brandon Snow preparing weirwood arrows to kill dragons, and figure out that it is, if it truly is, one of the very few possible ways to kill the Night King's dragon. I believe that if this comes true, Bran will figure it out in the heat of battle between the living and the dead. It will be of the crucial importance for Bran to share this information with the most skilled archers among their ranks. Having weirwood arrows made for the entire army would be quite a job to do, not to mention that there are very few weirwoods. So who would be Bran's champion in this task? Would Bran appoint this essential role to his sibling Jon Snow, or perhaps Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, whose skill has already been proven and shown off multiple times? The best choice would be Theon Greyjoy, accomplished archer whose confidence would surely be restored after completing such a task of a huge importance for the living side. Theon's skill with the longbow has been pointed out multiple times, and since he has done nothing with it to this date, he might just use it in the final season. Perhaps this has been foreshadowed back in the first season. In conclusion, among the very few possible ways of killing the Night King's dragon, I place my bet on Qyburn Scorpion with Dragonglass or Valyrian Steel pointed bolts. How I would like Viserion to die would be an epic battle between all 3 dragons and their riders. Dany riding Drogon along with Jon Snow riding Rhaegal, the dragon named after his father, fighting the Night King and his undead dragon to the bitter end. Viserion kills Drogon, Dany barely survives. Viserion also wounds Rhaegal, but while Viserion injures Rhaegal, Jon swings a leg over his saddle and leaps from his dragon to the Night King's, just like Prince Daemon Targaryen did during the Dance of Dragons. While in Daemon's hand was Dark Sister, House Targaryen's Valyrian Steel swords, Jon has his own Valyrian Steel sword, Longclaw. While Prince Daemon fought his nephew, Prince Aegon, Jon Snow will fight the Night King. It will end exactly the same. Just like Daemon did, Jon will also kill his opponent, but this time opponent's